The Green Lady of Wahiawa, Hawaii's haunted mystery. Deep in the heart of Wahiawa, Hawaii, nestled between the towering banyan trees and thick, tropical foliage, lies Wahiawa Botanical Garden. It's a serene and beautiful place during the day, but when the sun dips below the horizon and the darkness seeps into the trees, locals say something terrifying lurks within. This is where the legend of the Green Lady was born. Some say she was once a devoted mother who frequently walked through the garden's trails with her children. One fateful day, she and her youngest child wandered into the misty depths of the park. But while she returned, her child never did. Desperate, she searched relentlessly for her little one, combing through the jungle-like undergrowth, calling out their name. Days turned into weeks, then months, until eventually she disappeared too. Some say she perished from grief, her soul forever trapped in the garden, cursed to roam in anguish. Others believe she was transformed, her sorrow twisting her into something inhuman. Now people claim to see the Green Lady wandering through the park. She's described as tall and shadowy, with moss-covered skin, seaweed-like hair, and glowing green eyes that pierce through the night. And if you cross her path, you might not make it out. In the late 1990s, 3 local teenagers, Mark, Callio, and Jasmine, decided to test the legend. They had grown up hearing the warnings from their parents and grandparents. Do not go into Wahiawa Botanical Garden after dark. But like most teens, they weren't scared of ghost stories. One humid summer night, armed with nothing but a flashlight and a disposable camera, they slipped past the rusted entrance gate and ventured inside. At first, it was just a normal garden, overgrown, damp, filled with the buzzing of cicadas. But then, something changed. The deeper they walked, the more suffocating the air became. A foul stench, like rotting vegetation, filled their noses. Jasmine's flashlight flickered. Then they heard it, a rustling in the bushes behind them. Kaleo laughed nervously. Maybe it's just a pig. But then, a low, wet breathing. Noise echoed through the trees. Mark turned around. His flashlight caught something tall, hunched over, watching them from the shadows. It was her. Her skin dripped with moisture, covered in patches of green moss. Long, tangled hair slithered down her shoulders like vines. Her fingers, elongated and claw-like, reached out toward them. The 3 teens bolted, sprinting blindly through the dark. Branches tore at their arms. Jasmine tripped and screamed, but Mark grabbed her just in time. Behind them, the sound of slithering, crawling, moving through the undergrowth grew louder. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. They reached the exit and collapsed onto the pavement, gasping for breath. When they looked back, there was nothing there. But Mark, still shaking, pulled out his camera. He had taken one picture before running. When they developed it the next day, standing between the trees was a blurred, shadowy figure with piercing green eyes. They never went back. Paranormal researchers and skeptics have investigated the legend over the years. Some believe the Green Lady sightings are a combination of mass hysteria and tricks of the light. The dense foliage, high humidity, and mist could easily create illusions in the dark. Others point to a more rational explanation. Wahiawa is home to numerous legends of wandering spirits, particularly tied to ancient Hawaiian beliefs in vengeful ghosts called obake. Some theorize that the Green Lady is a modern adaptation of these ancient tales. However, local testimonies tell a different story. Multiple witnesses have described the same eerie sensation: the stench of decay, the sound of movement, the glowing green eyes peering through the trees. A park ranger once recounted how, during an early morning patrol, he found strange, wet footprints leading out of the forest and stopping abruptly at the entrance, like someone or something had been walking there during the night. Urban legends, whether true or not, often serve as warnings. The tale of the Green Lady teaches an important lesson: respect the unknown. Many cultures, including native Hawaiian traditions, warn against disturbing sacred places or ignoring age-old warnings. Whether it's a real spirit, a psychological phenomenon, or something else entirely, those who don't heed these warnings often find themselves facing the consequences. So if you ever find yourself wandering Wahiawa Botanical Garden at night and hear a rustling behind you, take my advice: don't turn around, don't stop running, and whatever you do, don't let her catch you. The Vanishing Hotel Room, a mystery from France. Paris, France, a city of romance, history, and secrets. But among its many mysteries, one tale has stood the test of time: the Vanishing Hotel Room. The story is said to have taken place in the late 19th or early 20th century, a time when Paris was thriving with grand hotels and aristocratic travelers. It centers around a mother and daughter who checked into a luxury Parisian hotel, but only one of them would ever check out. Some believe this is just an urban legend, but others insist it's based on true events. Either way, what happened inside that hotel room is deeply disturbing. In 1889, during the Exposition Universelle, World's Fair, in Paris, an English woman named Mrs. Graham and her adult daughter Emily traveled to the city. They checked into a lavish Parisian hotel after a long journey, exhausted but excited for their trip. After arriving, Mrs. Graham complained of feeling unwell. The hotel staff, eager to assist, called for a doctor while Emily was sent to the lobby to wait. Minutes passed. Then hours. Finally, a hotel attendant approached Emily with a confused expression. "Mademoiselle, what room was your mother in again?" "Room 342, he answered, growing impatient. The attendant exchanged a glance with his colleague. Then, in a calm but firm voice, he said, "There is no room 342. Emily's stomach dropped. "What are you talking about? I just left my mother there." The manager was called, followed by more hotel staff. They led her to where room 342 should have been, but instead there was only a blank hallway. No door, no room, no sign that it had ever existed. Emily panicked. "This isn't right. My mother was in that room. You checked us in together." But the hotel had no record of her mother. Not in their guest book. Not in their ledger. Not anywhere. Emily ran through the halls, screaming for help. But the other guest only stared at her with confusion or pity. She stormed into the doctor's office where her mother had supposedly been taken. The doctor, startled, asked, "Who are you looking for?" "My mother, Mrs. Graham. You're supposed to see her." But the doctor just shook his head. "I've never heard that name before." Emily searched for days, visiting police stations, hospitals, and even the British Embassy. But no one had seen her mother. No missing person report was filed. It was as if Mrs. Graham had never existed. Broken and alone, Emily eventually left, returning to England in disgrace. No one believed her, and she was never the same again. To this day, no trace of Mrs. Graham or room 342 has ever been found. Historians and skeptics have long debated the Vanishing Hotel Room legend. Some dismiss it as a classic case of false memory syndrome, that Emily, in a state of distress, became confused and misremembered events. Others suggest it was a cover-up. Perhaps Mrs. Graham died suddenly of an illness like the bubonic plague, and the hotel erased all evidence to avoid scandal. One chilling theory suggests the mother was murdered, and the hotel, possibly in connection with corrupt officials, disposed of her body to avoid a major investigation. However, there is one piece of evidence that keeps the legend alive. In 1915, a British writer named L.T. Mead published a short story called The Mystery of the Hotel Room. It describes an almost identical scenario. A woman vanishes from a Parisian hotel room, and no one believes she ever existed. The story was supposedly inspired by a true account, though no concrete records remain. Some researchers claim to have traced the legend back to real missing persons cases in Paris during the 19th century. Others point to similar stories that emerged in different countries, including a nearly identical tale from the 1880s in India, where a British woman vanished from a hotel and all records of her stay were erased. Coincidence? Or something more sinister? The Vanishing Hotel Room legend serves as a warning about the fragility of truth. Who controls reality? The person telling the story, the records in a book, or the people in power who decide what is remembered and what is erased? Whether this tale is a terrifying urban legend, a historical conspiracy, or just a case of mass hysteria, one thing is certain. Sometimes people disappear, and sometimes the world forgets them. So the next time you check into a hotel and something feels off, just remember, if no one remembers you were there, did you ever exist at all? Would you dare check into an old Parisian hotel alone? If you ever come across this painting in your home, get rid of it. Immediately. For decades, whispers of a terrifying curse have spread among homeowners, firefighters, and paranormal investigators. According to legend, if you hang the crying boy painting in your house, you might not have a house for much longer. This isn't just another ghost story, this is a real-life mystery, one that has left behind charred ruins, unanswered questions, and an eerie, lingering presence in homes across the United Kingdom. In the 1950s, a Spanish artist named Bruno Amadio, also known as Giovanni Bragolin, created a series of portraits featuring young children with haunting, sorrowful eyes and tears streaming down their faces. By the 1970s and 80s, these paintings were mass-produced and sold in department stores across the UK. Thousands of families unknowingly hung them on their walls, and then the fires began. By the mid-1980s, dozens, possibly hundreds, of homes had mysteriously burned to the ground. The flames devoured, except for one thing. The crying boy painting always remained untouched in the ashes. On September 4, 1985, the British tabloid The Sun published a chilling headline: "Blazing Curse of the Crying Boy." The article told the story of Ron and Mayhaw, a couple from Yorkshire whose home had just been reduced to a pile of smouldering rubble. Fire investigators ruled the cause as an accidental kitchen fire. But when firefighters combed through the wreckage, they noticed something deeply unsettling. Among the blackened ruins, one thing had survived completely untouched: a print of the crying boy painting. Even more disturbing, one of the firefighters mentioned this wasn't the first time they had seen the same painting in the remains of a burned-down home. As the story spread, more and more families came forward, each with eerily similar experiences. Their homes had been destroyed by fire. Their crying boy paintings had survived, completely unscathed. Some even claimed to have heard cries or whispers before the fires started. One woman swore that after she bought the painting, her entire family fell mysteriously ill. Then within a week, their house burned to the ground. Another man, terrified after hearing the stories, tried to destroy his painting by setting it on fire. But no matter how many times he lit the match, the painting refused to burn. By the end of 1985, firefighters across Britain had issued a strange but serious warning: do not keep the crying boy in your home. Naturally, skeptics stepped in to investigate. Firefighters offered a scientific explanation. They theorized that the paintings were printed on fire-resistant varnished hardboard, allowing them to withstand the flames. Art historians pointed out that mass-produced prints often had similar coatings. Maybe it was just a coincidence, but paranormal researchers weren't so sure. As they dug deeper, they uncovered a chilling backstory. Some claimed the painting was based on a real boy, an orphan who died tragically in a fire. One variation of the legend claimed his name was Don Bonillo, a Spanish child who accidentally set fire to his own home, killing his entire family. Branded as cursed, he was taken in by the artist Amadio, who painted his portrait. Years later, Bonillo supposedly died in a fiery car crash. His soul, some say, became trapped within the painting, cursing anyone who dared to hang it in their home. But was this true, or just another layer of an already bizarre mystery? To test the curse, a BBC radio host gathered several crying boy paintings and burned them live on air. This time, they did burn. Did this prove the curse was fake? Or was it simply a sign that the spirits had finally been put to rest, whether fact or fiction? The crying boy legend carries a warning: some things are better left alone. It is easy to dismiss superstitions, but at some point, too many coincidences stop being coincidences. Maybe the paintings were cursed, maybe people just needed something to blame for their tragedies. But if you ever see a haunting portrait of a tearful child at a flea market, in an old attic, or even hanging on your grandmother's wall, ask yourself one question: are you willing to take the risk? Because if this story has taught us anything, fire might not be the worst thing that follows.